Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about session view and just do another little overview and talk about how you can control different sounds with it. So what I have here is a couple of elements from that last track that I was just showing you, arranged into session views. So I've got several different clips here. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rename some of these. So I've got this drum group. I can mouse over this edge and make that a little bit bigger so you can see that it says group. So I just clicked right here till you got that symbol, or held right there till I get that symbol, and then click and drag and you can make the track nice and big if you want. Okay, these two tracks, I have this one road. So let's call this, I'm going to do Command R and call this keys. I'm going to call this one keys 2 because they're actually playing the same thing. If I double click on these clips, this is my keyboard riff. I double click on this one, this is also my keyboard riff. Over here, I have a little bit different kind of segment. Let's call this synth lick. And these are all meant to go together. So I'm going to call all three of these synth lick. Okay, now this is a little bit different because this is a group. So you can have groups, just like you can have groups in arrangement view. You can have groups in session view. So if I open this little toggle here, we see I have a snare, a rim, and a hat in here. And I can launch these clips separately, or I can launch them all at once using the group. So let's just launch the drums, all of them, by hitting the play button here. Okay, so now my drums are going. If I wanted a little bit more control, I could stop some of these. Let's maybe go down to just the hi-hat. Right? Oh, this rim click is turned off. Let's turn that on. It's muted. Okay, let's go back to adding the click. That's a little bright. Let's add in the clap. Okay, that's cool. Let's close that out and leave that going. So that's going to go for a while. Now this keys, I want both of these to start at once, right? So I could hit play and then hit play as fast as I can. And if I get it before the next downbeat, I'll be fine. They'll both start at the same time. But I don't think it's going to happen. Let's try it. Ah, I didn't make it. Now they're off from each other. Launching these back to back didn't really work, right? Because sometimes you don't really want to do that. Most of the times you don't want to do that. If you want them to play at the same time, which is another thing that we don't want to do all the time, but sometimes we do. If we wanted these to play at the same time, we could go all the way over here to master. This is called, if you go all the way across, this is called a scene. Everything in line is called a scene. So I can launch the whole scene, everything in that line, by hitting this. It's a pretty screaming organ. So now I just launched that whole scene. Now I want the drums back in. Can launch that. Right? So now for these next synths, I could launch them one at a time, but it'd be much smarter to launch the scene. But look at what launching that scene is going to do. It's going to hit all of these at once, which means all of these stop buttons are going to get hit, right? Which is okay for these tracks. But if I want these keys to keep going and the drums to keep going, they're not. So I'm going to hit it, right? And it stopped all of these because it hit those stop buttons. So there's a couple different ways. There's two different ways I could remedy that. If I wanted these keys to keep going, I could just copy and paste that clip down there. And the same thing with the drums. I can do it in a group just like that. So now when I launch scene 3, it's called, right? So now it works because I haven't hit any of those stop buttons. So you have to watch out for those stop buttons if you're trying to launch things from scenes. Another way we could do it, if I go back and get rid of those, we can remove the stop button. If I control click on it, I can do remove stop button. I could also do Command E, and that removes the stop button. So now there's no stop button there. I could shift click to highlight all of these and say remove stop button. So now if I've got the drums going and I launch scene 3, drums are going to keep going. Right? And if I want the keys to come back in, I can add them in whenever I want. Right? Or I could have launched the scene from right there if I wanted to. So that's the real basics of how it works. I can launch stuff whenever I want. It's going to fall right on the downbeat always, unless I've told it a different quantization point, which we'll talk about later. So there you have it. Overview of Session View.